more my way. Should I go ahead and floor it? Is that okay? If you're in control. Yeah. Oh, my way, my way, my way. Hey everybody, it's me, Jason Torchinsky, and another episode of Torch Drives. And here, who are we with? Who are you? What are we doing here? What's going on?
I'm Tony, and you're a Drive-A-Tank.
I'm a Drive-A-Tank. What now? The name is not terribly descriptive, so what do people do if you come to Drive-A-Tank?
We take normal people and we put them at the controls of tanks. And let them go for a drive.
Very exciting. So let's just dive right in. So what am I standing in front of right now?
So this is an Abbott FV433 Abbott SPG, or self-propelled gun.
And that's not a tank, right?
That's right. So a lot of people think it has a gun and it's armored. It must be a tank.
Looks like a tank.
And and that's not actually how it works. The way it gets its tank designation is by the job that it does.
Okay.
So this vehicle's job is it's not a frontline vehicle. It doesn't really work in close support of infantry. Its primary goal is indirect fire. It's artillery. So you'd stay a distance up to about 10 to 15 miles away from the enemy.
Yeah.
The gun's elevated and the crew just shoots. You might not hit anything specifically necessarily, but you're going to cause lots of chaos and confusion.
All right, well, let's get in there and see what happens.
Awesome. Let's rock and roll.
All right, so I just kind of hop down in here. Oh boy. It is cozy though. Can't really see under here, but I've got two big sticks in front of me. I've got a gas pedal, I've got a shifter. So far, you know, two-thirds of this feels familiar in a car. So to steer, so I'm gonna use these and I push forward in the direction I wanna go, right?
No.
Or pull back.
Opposite.
Pull back in the direction I wanna go. And even though it feels like I'm braking the side to turn, I was told by Tony that I'm actually not. What's happening is it's more like a transmission. It's like the side that's forward is gonna be in high gear and the side that's pulled back is in low gear, so the outside will go faster and you'll turn that way. Is that accurate?
Yep, it's a cleated track steering unit. So you put a band on a planetary and it'll speed up the outside track.
Okay, I want to point out, these are the most adorable windshield wipers I've ever seen. Look at these things, I love them, they're great. You know what's surprising is I'm tiny, and yet I don't really have to adjust anything. Like, why is that?
It is a British vehicle, so.
Oh, man, I think I'm even smaller than an average British person, but whatever. I'm just happy I didn't have to adjust anything or put an embarrassing block on the pedal. All right, so should we start it up? Push that one down. Look at that, and that was easy.
Just like magic.
It started right up. All right, the parking brake is basically the position the sticks are locked in, so.
Yep, so you'll pull straight back, do not push the buttons.
Okay, I'm pulling straight back. Oh, and they're free. All right.
Your brakes are off, we're in neutral.
So if
whenever you're ready, we can push that forward 2 notches.
Okay, 1, 2.
And you're good to go.
And I'm good to go. Oh boy, here we go. Yeah! It's got a throttle response of like a hippo on Zoloft. And oh wow, it's actually a lot more sensitive than you think. So I was wondering, why is a tank called a tank? So to figure this out, I contacted an entomologist who told me that actually they study bugs and not to ever call her again, and I should be talking to an etymologist who actually studies words. There we go. When the British were developing it, it was actually under control of the Navy, and they were originally known as land ships, but they felt that would be a little too evocative if anybody heard them talking about it or saying about it. Is there a way to... There we go.
Ooh, did you confuse left and right?
I did. Yeah. A little bit. So they decided to call them water carriers because when they were having these big hulls built, they could kind of argue this is like a giant water carrier. All of this is weird because of the way your head is out here. It just feels like I'm wearing like a giant robot suit. I kind of like. But, and this is the story I heard, the water carrier's initials were WC, which of course for the British means a toilet or a bathroom, and they felt, oh no, that's too improper to call it that. So they thought about synonyms for a water carrier and they came up with tank. Go over this way, here we go, all right. So the word tank is literally kind of a subterfuge because they wanted everyone to think the things they were building were just giant tanks for water. But the name just kind of stuck, and it was actually in use as early as 1915 when the very first British tanks were coming out, and we've just stuck with it since then. Now I got through the mud. So the sensation of driving it, in case you're in the market for one of these, isn't that bad. You actually get used to it pretty quickly, but it is very different than regular driving. It's actually a lot more sensitive than you think. Should I go ahead and floor it? Is that okay? If you're in control, yeah. Can you do a donut in this thing?
A really slow, boring donut.
What is this big tank?
So this is a Polish T-55 AMS. This is basically the T-54 turns into the T-55, and this is one of the later generations of T-55. It's got the RMSH track, the brow armor on the turrets, so it's fairly advanced. It's capable of firing anti-tank guided missiles. Some of the T-55s are actually converted from T-54s, which would have been mid-50s, obviously.
Okay,
obviously. Then, yeah, 55. So Russian tanks, typically their number equates to when they were adopted.
I didn't know that. That's a handy tip.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So we may have tank connoisseurs watching.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
The bottom half is very similar to T-44, but then the top of the turret for the T-54 was somewhat revolutionary because it's an egg shape. And as
it is.
A lot of people who are into science know that the shape of an egg is one of the strongest shapes.
Nature's tank, they call the egg, some people.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. The engine in this.
This is a 38.8 liter V12.
38 liter V12. That's insane.
It's an aluminum V12. It's based off the Liberty aircraft engine of the 30s. Would have been a very similar engine to what's in the T-54. And then it does have 2 starter systems. But the engine kind of dates itself back to the T-34, which would have been designed in 1934.
Yeah.
So even in the 50s, electric starters weren't as reliable as they are today.
Sure.
So the Russians utilized an air starter. Now this air starter isn't like what a lot of people think of as an air starter that spins in an air motor. Instead, it directly injects high pressure air. So it's about 2216 PSI, similar to like a scuba tank, pressure, and it's injected into the cylinders via distributor. So you inject air into it, it pushes the cylinder down, and then as the engine keeps turning, it's pushing the cylinders just like the explosion would.
Right, right.
So that's how they start it. And then later models, actually this vehicle has an onboard air compressor. They can replenish its tanks, its air tanks, where the earlier models, the T-54 and I believe the T-34 did not.
So you had to start it by a separate air source.
Yeah, so more like a fighter plane. A lot of those have to start off an external source. The exhaust is interesting.
Yeah,
there's a flange on here so that they can bolt a snorkel on.
Oh,
because
right,
one of the big designs of the T-54, T-55 series was fording water. So they would seal all the open spaces would get sealed. So one of these bin boxes would be full of all the equipment you needed to seal all your hatches.
So before you forded water, you'd have to stop, seal everything up.
You stop, the loader's periscope comes out, and this bolts on the top of the turret. So then that's one section. That's how much water you could ford, roughly 15 feet or so, I guess.
This thing would go 15 feet?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so you're basically under there for an undetermined amount of time. You can't see anything, you just drive straight forward, and I'm guessing there's like water dripping in the cracks and crevices.
It's gotta be terrifying. That has to be a terrifying process. Who the hell would want to do that?
Tank submarine.
God damn, that's terrible.
If I want you to stop, I'll say clutch.
Okay.
All right, so now you go ahead and push your clutch in, all the way to the floor. Yep, it's fine, let it out. Now push those levers forward. You got it. All right. We want to come a little left. A little left into that descent. Yep, there you go.
Like that?
Yep, a little more. We're really wide over there, don't forget. If you look, you're on the left side of the vehicle, so you can come my way more. So my way more, there you go. All right. There you go. It's just because you don't want to be slipping those clutches.
That Russian T-55 is actually, I found it pretty difficult to drive.
If you give it a little bit of throttle, she'll start to turn a little better.
You kind of get turned in the direction you're going to go for a while, and then you leave it, and then you turn back, so it's a herky-jerky kind of motion. It's not smooth.
Coming my way. Pull her into that ash here. There you go. You got it. Kind of keep that track. If you look, we're in the grass.
Oh, okay. I saw the gun, and in my head, I kind of thought, well, the tank probably ends around here. As you can see, the tank very much does not end around here.
I'm going to move the whole vehicle my way.
As a result,
my way, my way, my way.
I knocked over an entire full-grown tree.
Clutch, 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 clutch.
Sorry about your tree.
That was my favorite tree.
All right, sorry, tree. But I'm sure you did something bad. So when it comes to machines of war, it's not often you find something that's actually charming. And this boring looking cube here is something that I think is genuinely charming. So Tony, would you mind telling the people what this thing is?
So this is a boiling vessel. This is out of a British vehicle because only the British would be worried about having tea in the middle of a war, but that's exactly what it is. The theory is your soldiers will fight for you better if they have a stomach full of tea and are happy and satisfied. So it's a electrical heater, really. You just open it up. It's a little basket comes out for your chow or your tea. You put a little water in it, just like a boiler. Close the lid, plug it in, and
But it's effectively, it's a tea kettle for inside of a tank because the British actually felt it was better for their soldiers to be able to have tea while they're out in the middle of a war, because during World War II, there were actually times where they were outside of the tank making tea.
And it's also the reason they have such complex electrical systems, because it takes a lot of electrical energy to power this thing.
Yeah.
So on a lot of British vehicles like our 432s, you'll actually find two giant generators that generate 3.5 kVA of three-phase power, which is enough to run like 5 houses, because this thing draws so much energy.
Yeah, but the important thing is, if you're in a British tank, you can have a cup of tea. You know, I always kind of like these little Saturn coupes. I always thought they were kind of fun, especially because these guys had this little extra third door. And I remember when they came out, they were kind of a big deal. And one of the things that the Saturn people kept making a lot of noise about was these panels, these composite plastic panels that they used for all the body panels and the sides and the fenders and the doors. And the thing was, if like a shopping cart ran into you or a minor fender bender, they held up really well. But you know what they never ever talked about was how well these composite panels would hold up if you were to say, like, run a tank over the car. All right, thanks. I also kind of like the face of these Saturns. This one looks kind of pissed off. It's kind of squinty-eyed and kind of growling, and there's a good reason for it.
As good as you were at hitting the tree, you might miss the car.
Might.
So we're gonna pick up on that shifter twice.
All right. 1, 2.
And we're off.
Now we're off.
Go ahead and give her a little bit of throttle. There you go.
About the speed good?
Yeah, a little more wouldn't hurt. There you go, that's perfect right there. Just where she sings a steady tune.
All right. And...
Keep going, keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going. And stop. Perfect.
Wow, that felt pretty good.
Keep going, keep going, keep going.
After all those years in the 90s, those smug Saturn people having their little meetings, talking about how it's a different kind of car. How different is it now, Saturn lovers?
Stop.
Let's see. Oh, it's not so bad. Actually, you know what? They're not wrong. The door panel is actually completely unharmed. All right. I gotta hand it to Saturn, that actually held up pretty well. The interior had a little damage though. Nothing that won't buff out. The seats look a little compressed. The aluminum hood, not doing so great. Look, the plastic bumper, which took the full force of the tank tread, is actually not that bad. They could probably turn around and sell this thing. Wow, all right, Saturn. I'm impressed. This is kind of a nightmare, but I kind of love it. Tony, this was a huge treat. I'm sorry I knocked over your tree, but thank you for letting me destroy your Saturn. And I gotta say, it's pretty remarkable that we live in a world where a human being, just for the simple exchange of some currency, can do this just because you feel like it, because this is America, damn it. This was amazing, and Tony's taught us so much today about tanks. Thank you, this has been great, and thanks for watching Torch Drives. Right now, you and I are in here. How many people would normally be in the turret of the tank if it was actually being used?
So we have a crew of 3 in the fighting compartment. We'd have a gunner in front of you,
Right.
a commander where you are, and I would be the loader.
If you're in a space like this for days, you're eating in here. You're peeing. You're using the bathroom in here potentially.
Potentially. So commander's seat. They
Yeah.
actually have a center of the seat that pulls out, and there's
Oh.
a tank in there in little bags, and you could do
So
your thing
someone
in the
could be hypothetically taking an uncomfortable shit while there's 2 or 3 people like
Oh, yeah.
inches away. My God, that's teamwork right there. That's amazing.